I'm Captain Riley Walker, and I thought I knew everything about my life until that night. I had just come home from 2 years, stationed in Germany. The air in my dad's kitchen smelled like fried chicken, cornbread, and the kind of peace you only find in the South. He'd been quiet most of dinner, asking the usual things about the base, my unit, and the weather over there. Then, just as I reached for another biscuit, he said it. "So, how's that trust fund your mother set up doing? Must be worth a bit by now." The words didn't land right away. I laughed, thinking he was teasing, but his face stayed still, calm like he'd just asked what time it was. The room went strangely quiet. My grandmother looked down at her plate. The clock ticked too loudly, and for a second, I wondered if I'd misheard him. "What trust fund?" I asked, half smiling, half holding my breath. He didn't answer. He just took another bite of chicken and changed the subject like nothing had happened. My chest felt tight, but I forced a smile and pretended it was nothing. That's what you do in my family. You stay composed, especially when you feel confused. Still, I couldn't shake it. A trust fund wasn't something you joked about, not in my world. And that one simple question delivered between bites of dinner was the beginning of everything I didn't know about the people I loved most. After dinner, I couldn't let it go. I waited until the dishes were done, the leftovers packed, and Dad had settled into his recliner, with the TV humming low in the background. I stood by the doorway and asked again, quieter this time, "What trust fund were you talking about earlier?" He looked over his shoulder, remote in hand, and shrugged. "Just something your mom set up. It's complicated." That word hit me wrong. Complicated meant don't ask. Complicated meant stop digging. But I'd spent years taking orders. I wasn't going to retreat now. Grandma was still in the kitchen, wiping down the counter like she had all night. She didn't look up when she spoke. She did set something up. Your mother. Before she passed. I turned to her slowly. "What do you mean?" Grandma pressed her lips together, then nodded toward the hallway. "Go upstairs. Guest room closet. There's a box with your name on it. You were never supposed to see it until you came home for good." I didn't know what that meant, but I went. My hands shook as I pulled down a dusty blue shoebox from the top shelf. My name was written in black ink, faded but clear. I sat on the edge of the guest bed and lifted the lid. Inside were a few photos, a baby bracelet, and an envelope sealed with thick tape. On the front it said, "For Riley, when you're ready." The handwriting was unmistakably hers, my mother's. My throat tightened. I hadn't seen her handwriting in over a decade. She died when I was 14, but some memories still felt like yesterday. Her voice hums in the kitchen, the smell of her shampoo when she hugged me. I stared at the envelope for a long time, like opening it might bring her back, or break me open in some way I wasn't ready for. When I finally peeled it open, the paper crackled gently. She'd written in long, looping lines. The first sentence read, "If you're reading this, you're old enough to understand things I couldn't explain when you were little." I paused. My eyes already stung. The room felt heavier. I kept reading, each word landing like a drop of rain on dry ground. She wrote about her hopes for me, how she wanted me to have choices that she never did, how she and a friend she trusted had set aside money in a long-term trust in my name. She said she didn't want me to ever depend on anyone to live the life I wanted. That one day, when I was grown and strong enough to make decisions for myself, the trust would be mine. "If your father hasn't told you by now, ask him," she wrote. "I hope he did the right thing. But if not, don't let it stop you." Her words were soft but unshakable. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. For years, I'd carried this image of her as someone kind but fragile, someone who faded too soon. But here was proof she'd been thinking ahead, protecting me even after she was gone. And now, all those pieces, Dad's offhand comment, Grandma's silence, this letter clicked into place. A different kind of storm was coming, and it started with one question that was no longer a joke. "Dear Riley, if you're reading this, then you're not my little girl anymore. You're grown now, maybe even stronger than I ever got to see. I wish I could be there beside you, hand on yours, saying these things out loud. But life had other plans, and this letter is the best I could do. When you were born, I knew I wanted to give you more than love. I wanted to give you freedom. Not just the kind that lets you choose your clothes or your favorite color, but the kind that lets you build a life with your own hands. So I started saving. Not much at first, but I kept adding to it. Quietly, steadily. I didn't tell your dad everything. Some things were mine to protect. I worked with an old friend of mine, a financial advisor I trusted with my whole heart. Together, we set up a trust account in your name. The terms were simple. You'd gain full access on your 25th birthday, no sooner. I did it that way because I knew the world might not be kind, and I wanted you to have time to grow before holding something so heavy. This money was never meant to buy anything. It was meant to open doors. If you want to travel, go. If you want to study, learn. If you want to build something that makes your heart beat faster, build it. But above all, don't ever let someone else tell you what your life should look like. You've always had a fire in you, Riley. Even when you were small, you didn't just ask questions, you questioned the world. I loved that about you. Still do. And I want you to hold on to that voice, especially when things feel uncertain. It will guide you, even when no one else will. I know your father loves you in his own way, but he carries burdens he never learned to share. If he kept this from you, I hope it wasn't out of cruelty, but fear. Still, this is yours. No one gets to take it, not even him. You don't owe anyone an explanation for what you choose to do with your life. Not me, not him, not anyone. You are allowed to dream, without permission. You are allowed to change your mind. And you are allowed to walk away from anything that dims your light. I wish I could see the woman you've become. I bet you're incredible. But I want you to remember, no matter how far you go, you were always enough, exactly as you are. And now, the rest of your story is yours to write. With all the love I ever had, Mom. P.S. You'll know what to do. You always have. I waited until the next morning. The sun hadn't fully come up yet, and the house was quiet. Dad was already in the kitchen pouring coffee, acting like nothing had changed. I stood in the doorway with the letter in my hand. We need to talk, I said. He didn't look up right away, just sipped his coffee and gave a slow nod. When I asked him about the trust, his eyes shifted. He said he didn't know what I meant. I held up the envelope. She left this for me. I know about the money, Dad. He let out a long sigh, like he'd been bracing for this day for years. It wasn't what she made it sound like, he said. I was just trying to hold it safe, for the family. Oh, I felt something crack. You mean for yourself, I said quietly. He set his mug down harder than necessary. Don't talk to me like that. Everything I've done was for this house. For you. My heart pounded. Then why is most of it gone? He didn't answer. He just turned away and said, things got tight after she died. I used what I had to keep us afloat. But it didn't add up. We never lost the house. We never went without. If anything, life got easier. He got a new truck, went on fishing trips, bought a new flat screen for the Super Bowl last year. Something didn't fit. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore the pattern. The money hadn't been used to survive. It had been absorbed into his life like it belonged to him. I left without saying another word. I drove straight back to my base and found the legal office. I'd never needed a JAG officer before, but I wasn't going to let this slide. They helped me file a request to access the account records tied to my name. It took a few days, but when the report came in, I couldn't breathe. The balance was barely over $100,000. The original account had been seeded with over $2 million. Hundreds of withdrawals, wire transfers, expenses listed as personal maintenance, property holding fees, and vague terms like asset relocation. No notes, no details, just money that vanished over the years. My mom's trust, her legacy, the gift meant to secure my future, had been drained. And my dad, the man I'd always respected, had done it with my name on the paperwork. The kind of betrayal that doesn't just hurt, it rewrites the way you see someone. He hadn't just made a mistake, he'd made a choice, again and again. I sat in the back lot of the base with the papers in my lap, the numbers swimming on the page. I'd spent my life following orders, trusting the chain of command. But now, for the first time, I had to question the one person I'd never thought to doubt. My father. The lawyer called me in one afternoon with a new file. He said, "There's a property in Texas, a ranch, registered under your name." I blinked at him, confused. I'd never set foot in Texas except during a layover. He slid the deed across the table. There it was. Riley Ann Walker, sole owner of 87 acres just outside of Austin. My signature wasn't on anything, but legally, it was mine. I drove home that night, trying to breathe through the growing sense of unease. I waited until I saw Dad on the porch, sipping sweet tea like nothing had changed. I didn't even sit down. "When were you going to tell me about the ranch?" I asked. His brow furrowed like I was overreacting. "It was an investment. For you. For your future." He said it like he expected a thank you. I asked if I'd ever been consulted, ever signed a paper. He shrugged. "You were overseas. I took care of it. That's what I do." My jaw clenched. "So you used my trust to buy a property? Under my name? Then what? Borrowed against it?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. The truth sat heavy in the air between us. I realized then that this wasn't about survival. This wasn't a father doing what he had to do to keep a roof over our heads. This was control. Strategic, deliberate control. He hadn't protected my future. He'd leveraged it for his own gain. That ranch wasn't mine. Not in any real way. It was a placeholder. A fake gift hiding a real debt. I didn't know how deep the damage went yet, but in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. He didn't just break my trust. He'd erased my ownership of my own life and replaced it with a lie. I didn't hesitate. The next morning, I walked into the JAG office, not as a soldier, but as a victim. I laid out the documents for a legal officer, the trust, the bank statements, the ranch deed, and the defaulted loans. Her face grew grim. "Captain," she said, her voice firm but kind, "this is a serious crime. But your father is a civilian. The UCMJ doesn't apply to him." My stomach dropped. "So you can't help me?" "We can't prosecute him," she clarified. "But we can advise you. This is fraud. You've been the victim of identity theft and gross financial misconduct, likely facilitated by your status as a deployed soldier. You need a civilian attorney. Immediately." She handed me a card for a legal aid society and a list of reputable fraud lawyers in my home state. I hired a lawyer the next day, a small, sharp woman named Diaz, who specialized in financial crimes. When she saw the paperwork, she didn't just see a family dispute. She saw a pattern of criminal intent. "He used your active duty status as a shield, assuming you'd be too far away or too bound by duty to notice," Diaz said. "We won't just file a civil suit for the recovery of assets. We'll be sending this to the district attorney's office." My hands didn't shake. I wasn't scared. I was angry. Not reckless, but sharp. And more than anything, I wanted it all on record. When I told Dad about the lawsuit, he didn't yell. He looked tired. Like I'd betrayed him. "You're going to regret this," he said. His voice was low, warning, almost broken. "I did everything for you." I looked him in the eye and said, "No. You did everything to me." He stared at me like he didn't recognize who I'd become. But I wasn't that quiet girl anymore. I wasn't the soldier who kept her head down and followed orders. I was the woman my mother raised me to be, and I was done giving up pieces of myself to protect someone who never protected me. Faced with a mountain of evidence and the threat of criminal prosecution, he didn't fight. His lawyer pushed for a settlement before it ever reached a courtroom. The terms were ironclad. The title to the ranch was transferred solely to me, free and clear. A binding restitution plan was put in place for the funds he couldn't immediately repay. He would never control my assets again. Legally, it was a clean win. But standing outside the lawyer's office, it didn't feel like triumph, just quiet. I chose not to personally press the DA for criminal charges, not because I forgave him, but because I didn't want to spend another year of my life circling anger. Holding him accountable was enough. Dragging him further down wouldn't lift me any higher. I wanted peace more than punishment. And maybe, deep down, I knew he had already lost more than he understood. In the months that followed, I left active duty. Not because I was broken, but because I had found something worth building. I started a nonprofit for young veterans, teaching financial literacy and legal self-defense. We held workshops in small town halls and dusty reserve centers. We showed them how to read contracts, manage benefits, and ask questions no one ever teaches you to ask. I didn't want another soldier waking up 10 years too late to realize they never owned their own name. Some people called it noble. But for me, it was healing. It was how I rewrote the story that my father tried to claim. I'd spent years being silent, being careful, trying not to make anyone uncomfortable. Now, I spoke plainly. Justice didn't make me feel powerful. It made me feel clear, and that was more than enough to start again. I went back to the ranch one fall morning, months after the final ruling. The air was crisp and still. The fields wide and golden under the Texas Sunday. I stood alone at the edge of the pasture, the same land that once felt like a lie, now fully mine. It was strange how quiet power could feel. Not loud, not angry, just grounded. The barn still smelled like dust and cedar. The keys fit in my hand without trembling. I walked through each room slowly, letting the silence settle, not as emptiness, but as space reclaimed. This place had been used to control me. Now it was a symbol of everything I'd taken back. I didn't feel hate anymore. I felt clarity. Healing didn't mean forgetting what he did. It meant knowing the truth and choosing to move forward anyway. Not weaker, not bitter, just unafraid. There's something sacred about standing where someone tried to erase you and realizing they failed. They didn't win. They never really did. If someone took your power, you can take it back. Even if it's messy, even if it's slow, you deserve to stand on your own land, hold your own name, and live a life that's fully yours. I'm not telling this story because I want sympathy. I'm telling it because maybe someone listening needs to be reminded. Your voice matters, your fight is worth it, and your future is still yours to claim.